Hi everyone. I know this is not a typical Saradigm video, but I often think about these questions that I'm going to bring up, and I figured I would share them. Plus, I've always loved talking about things that are less popular to talk about, and I think these are pretty important to think about, even if you don't discuss them, but I think you should discuss a lot of these as well, and I'll explain why. Now let me go through each question. You can think on it yourself, but I'm going to answer it for myself, so I'm not just posing a difficult question without answering it myself, okay? The first question I have is, would you want to know when or how you will die? You could take this question two ways. If I had to choose one, I would probably want to know when as opposed to how, because I could make a scheduled list of everything to get done in time. That's just my nature, and I think I would much rather figure out who do I need to see, what do I need to do to make sure my family isn't in jeopardy. And knowing how is kind of, personally, it's just a selfish thing. It's just like okay, how can I make this less painful for me? That's the only reason I'd want to know how. And it would be nice to know maybe, but it could also be something I don't want to know. Like, if I find out I'm going to get murdered or die slowly and painfully in a crash or something, I would probably try to go against the inevitable, and I wouldn't enjoy life anymore. But you could also take this a different way. Would you want to know either or neither? And I would definitely choose not to know either, because I'm simply content knowing I'll die eventually right now, especially because it's only a physical death. And I don't want to toil over how or when it could happen. I just think that could take so much joy and peace from whatever life I have left. And it's good to ask this question because you could come to grips with what you believe about death, especially because it's only a physical death, if you believe that like I do. And you'd probably react to death a different way than maybe your spouse or than I do, and it's a good question to ask if you want to figure out how you'll react to a question or how you'd react to death. And even if you do find out an illness will kill you, it's still good to address how you would feel about it. You know what I mean? The second question I have is, are you okay with death or with dying? I think some of us might say, when I lose someone, it's really hard, but I'd hate even more if I died. Or maybe it's reversed. I don't know. Maybe you are on the same page for either circumstance, but I'm mostly addressing, are you okay with dying yourself? I am in my 24-year-old self thinking, God, I really would like to raise children, travel the world, and really enjoy more of the music ministry and choir and things. So I really don't want to die yet. I remember when I was engaged, I sometimes very seriously would pray, please, Jesus, don't come again until I've been married, have been through my honeymoon at least. I would like to have I was praying this back then, and I didn't want to die. I didn't want Jesus to come yet. So I understand the not wanting to lose out on experiences here, but if I were to die, I confidently know that I'm going to heaven. If you want to know why I'm so confident, then you can hit me up. But because I know I'll be in the presence of God, I'd not think twice about staying there if I had a choice. I wouldn't even think about things left inexperienced here. I would just likely be hugging Jesus and look down at the people hurting at my absence, and I'd hopefully be able to continue to see them as I enjoy what they hopefully will enjoy when they die. You know, once I'm in heaven, I'm not going to think, man, I really wish I was back on earth. I really don't think anyone thinks that if they get to heaven. Now, it's good to ask this question. Is physical death should not scare you? I mean, how you might die could scare you if you did know, but I haven't met anyone able to predict how they will die. Even if you have a terminal illness, you could die some other way. So why spend your precious life worrying about it? Easier said than done, I know, and if you have experienced death in other ways that people haven't, it's even harder, like witnessing a murder or suicide could be one reason that you're like, nobody can relate to why I fear death so much. And I hear you, and on that note, I just want to say, don't get so okay with death that you take your own life. I cannot relate to desiring suicide, nor do I think I can talk you out of it necessarily, but I can listen. Maybe you're thinking that you'd be doing the world or God a justice by killing yourself, but although it's probably not the wisest thing to say to people who really are suicidal, I just don't think that's true. I think that's a lie from the devil. I think he wants you to take your own life, because the things we experience on earth sometimes show us who God is. I'm not saying if you kill yourself or if you know someone who's killed yourself that you'll end up in hell. I cannot say that. But since I brought it up, I have to say that you matter. And I can't control if you decide to take your own life. Again, I can't relate to what you might be going through necessarily. But it will not hurt to tell you that you matter. I don't have to know you to say that. I know every life matters, but some people choose to do things that don't matter and to believe they don't matter. But that's coming from a place that isn't of God, and it's not something I would ever tell you. So just know that you matter and that you don't have to go that way. And if you're thinking about going that way, then I'll listen and I'll try to understand. And if I don't understand, I'll still listen. On to the third question. Would you prefer to die first or for your spouse to die first? And this can apply if you're engaged or dating, and I'm sure it would be of pretty equal importance. But I'm married, so I'm just going to say spouse. Now, part of me says not to give Preston the kind of pain of grieving over me if I were to die first, but if he left first, then I'd have to experience the deepest form of grief and would experience probably the largest hit to our lifestyle, more than he would, because the bulk of our income is from him, and I think I would experience more lifestyle changes, and that's kind of selfish, but that's my answer. I mean, I'd selfishly want to get to heaven first. I'd selfishly not want to feel the pain of grief of losing my husband. That would probably be the worst of all. Believe it or not, this is extremely difficult to talk about, despite my matter-of-fact demeanor. It's honestly my deepest fear, but that's exactly why I address this difficult and real question. And why it's good to ask is this is probably one of the more important and relevant ones. You need to really understand mentally and emotionally how you'll deal with the inevitability that someone will die first. It might be your spouse. It might be you. Getting closure here could help you address it and then put it out of your mind until it happens. And it could be what stirs you to make preparations. You don't have to be on your deathbed to get a will. In fact, that's not very wise. I need to get one of my own, actually. I think Preston has one. It might need to be updated a little, but it's super important to make provisions. You don't have to, when you're 18, say, okay, I think I'm going to die in a week. I don't want you to live like that, but just be thinking about it. And if it's in your mind or on your heart randomly, take it as this might be a good thing to invest in when I get a chance. It's not like you have to do it right away, but do it as soon as you can. And because you really can't say when or how you'll die. That was just the question I posed to kind of get this going. But no one really, really knows unless they plan to take someone's life or take their own life. Even then, some of them aren't successful, so it's really hard to say 100%. The fourth question is, if your spouse did die first, would you remarry? Okay, we're getting to the real deal. It's difficult to think of now because I don't desire marriage with anyone else right now, but it would depend likely on my age and the healing time that I would need. If I'm like 70 or older, I'm sure I wouldn't remarry. Maybe even younger, I wouldn't. But I'd surely need a long time to heal first, regardless of my age. It's not out of the question to want to remarry, really. And biblically, you could do either. You could not remarry or you can. I mean, it's not it's not an issue of sin or anything. I mean, I know that with natural attraction and enough time getting to know someone, that it could be possible to love someone enough to marry them, even after a loss. I can't ever imagine it feeling like my love for Preston, my marriage with Preston, especially if we have children by then and maybe even grandchildren. There would be a lot to consider. I'm just thankful that my spouse, Preston, is still living, but it's something that I think of all the time. I mean, it's actually a problem of mine, fearing, what if Preston died today? How would I even make it? And that tells me that I'm kind of too dependent on Preston. I have always had this issue. When I was in high school, junior high, you might call me clingy. I don't think I'm clingy now, but I'm definitely very dependent on my husband. And I need to come to grips with, if he did die, God would still take care of me. I need to rely on that more than anything. Why it's good to ask this question is, it's perhaps the most essential one of all. Make sure, if you are married at least, that you discuss this eventually. It might be hard to bring up before you're married, because you might still be getting to know each other. But eventually, and by eventually I mean soon, if you're married, talk about it. Not to say it'll happen soon, but on top of mourning and financial hits, you don't want to wonder things like this. It is never easy to talk about, but it comes up sometimes, and you need to be on the same page or figure out why you aren't on the same page. I think it's more important than people give it credit for. I pose these questions not to be dark, but to have something to look back on. Talking about it gets it out of my head. I can't leave these in my head too long. But also, these are things you should think about and discuss, not at length if you don't want. Just consider the reality that life here is temporary. Our life here matters, but it's temporary, and it matters because we don't just end in the ground. That's what I believe anyway. I will also say this. I take so seriously my death that if I were to die first, Preston knows that I have a document that I've saved of things I'd want at my funeral, including a song I want played, of course, and I wrote a letter to my grieving husband to read if I go first to comfort him. And I'm not going to give away everything because I'm sure it'll change over time, but I mean, I have thought this through and I've put other things in there. It isn't a will, but it's supplemental to it. It's what would help others who will miss me. That's what wills and letters and things like this are for, because death only affects those left behind, really. For some of you, this could be very emotional to think about. You may be just lost someone to death, and I want to tell you that you are perfectly okay not being okay. I hope you have someone who listens long, cares intently, and gives you only the advice you need. If you have any questions or clarifications, please feel free to talk to me. I'm going to link just a couple of important things below. You can check them out. And again, I have to address the if you are suicidal thing. I know people are like, oh, I understand how you feel. You don't have to do this. And although that's something I would probably naturally want to say, I know it doesn't always help. So if you are suicidal, I hope you have someone you can talk to and that won't necessarily talk back to you. Even if they have good things to say, I hope that they listen. I think that's what you want the most. Maybe some of you feel like you aren't being listened to, that you don't matter. I hope that you're listened to. I can't promise that you will or not. I don't know who is in your life, but please know that you matter. It may not be as clean and painless as you think suicide would be. I don't want you to miss out on your purpose. And if you need help understanding what your purpose is, I can show you what I believe my purpose is and why I believe everyone's purpose is something we can all find out. It might be your purpose, similar to mine. So please reach out to someone if it's not me. I hope you do. I hope you aren't considering taking your own life, because you really do matter enough even to go through whatever you're going through that's causing you suffering. Until next time.